I haven't got many chances to talk to you as my survey of chemistry class this summer because of the online format. And I like to share some things that I think are really important about science and citizenship, because a lot of this course is not about your learning chemistry. It's about your learning to think about science and be more comfortable thinking about science. So I'm going to also talk about giving presentations. In scientific presentations, you don't want to leave people guessing. You want interesting and surprising things, but you don't want to leave people guessing. So you usually start with an overview of what you're going to talk about. Pure science, just the search for truth, independent of the rest of life, is a myth. We're going to look at how science interacts with the rest of things going on in government and business in a few different examples, because science is shaped by money and politics. Over time, science does approach greater truth, because scientists learn new things, they correct old ideas. But while science is being developed, it can often be confusing. A lot of the times we have to make judgments now about what science we're going to follow. And often you can resolve that confusion by looking at the money. Who's benefiting? Who's hurting? Where's the money coming from behind different scientific claims? And we can all work together to make science a more beneficial thing in our world. Another thing about these slides, because I'm presenting with a little picture of myself, I've left out a blank spot in the corner so that I could broadcast a little picture of myself. I have done dark backgrounds with light words. When you're looking at a screen, that's usually easier on the eyes to not have so much light, but having the high contrast helps it be readable. Now, this line I put across the middle maybe wasn't the best choice for reading some things, but I've followed this pattern generally. So there is a pattern that we're going to see in several different stories. Scientists figure out facts and useful technology. People use the technology to make money. When the tech and science are determined to be harmful or shown to be harmful and people are learning it, those making money will cover it up. How can you tell which side the bad science is when you're not an expert? Well, typically you can follow the money. Look at who's making the most money off of it and what the incentives are to keep making that money. Journalists, scientists, and democracy are important tools in making things better for all of us and revealing bad science when it happens. Let's look at some of these stories. We'll start with a couple of old ones. Lead in gasoline. Actually, this has only been phased out all over the world in 2020. It was made illegal in the last country, I believe. But back in the early 1900s, some people discovered that if you put a tetraethyl lead, and you've learned what ethyl means, so it's a lead ion with 4 ethyl groups around it, in gasoline at a small percentage, very small percentage, it reduces knocking in gasoline engines that make them less efficient, and it makes the fuel burn with a higher octane rating, and the cars are more efficient and more powerful. This is interesting information. They also discovered lots of other compounds that could do the same thing. Turns out that lead wasn't even the best anti-knocking agent, it was just the cheapest. So the lead and automotive industries stood to make a lot of money by using the cheapest anti-knocking agent. And they did make a lot of money. Even though people knew before they even started using it that lead was toxic. People have known for centuries that lead is toxic. When they started making tetraethyl lead, workers got sick and some died. The workers called it loony gas because it made people go crazy. They even avoided calling it lead. They called the ethyl to sound more like ethanol and other compounds that were not so harmful. The lead industry sued scientists and public health officials who said this is bad and did research saying lead is bad. They sued them to get them to stop and succeeded. They published bad science. They paid scientists, and some of those scientists published bad science. They ran PR campaigns discrediting good science. There is no amount of lead that is good for us, and people have known that for a long time. So, how do you recognize the bad science? The lead industry and the gasoline industry knew the health effects, knew there were better agents, they covered it up, but you wouldn't have necessarily known that. But you could see that they were making millions off of it. Public health and university scientists and independent journalists were saying, lead's bad for people. It's killing people. They've been saying that since the 1920s. They were not making lots of money off of this. So history has shown that the people making lots of money off of it were lying. The people not making lots of money off of it, and whose jobs were to care for public health and represent the public, were telling the truth about it. How did we fix it? After decades of scientists and journalists and public health officials telling the truth about lead in gasoline, the car industry finally changed. We outlawed lead in gasoline and in many other things, and lead levels have been coming down in the environment and in you and me since the 1980s. And that's the end of our first story, and in the next video I'm going to start on the second story.